Feelings, you're making them up. You're on your own. Just a matter of luck now, honey. Plenty of cake for everyone, you said. I try to get out of bed with lines on my face. I'm such a disgrace, oh yeah. Tried to contain it. I didn't mean to start a war. You can point your pistol at me, but I'm the quicker draw. Nah, nah, nah. Who's gonna feed me? Now I've broken all the plates. Who's gonna love me? Who's gonna love me?
Hey, Chell.
I am all the mess. I am all the mess. I am all the mess.
Hey, Sarah. Hi, Mom.
I am all the mess. I am all the mess. I am all the mess. I am.
But I think talking to
And Sarah, she's on. Perfect.
would be
We're just gonna hang out for a minute, wait for a few more people to pop on.
Let it run out the door.
This is my new single, The Mess, in the background. It's all about anxiety and depression, having a fight
So good, God
as to who's gonna take over the host.
never
You
win
can find it everywhere online.
anymore. I am all the mess. I am all the mess. I am all the mess. I am. I am all
Water check.
I am all the mess. I am all the mess. I am.
Thanks for being here, everybody. We're gonna start in just a few minutes.
Modern flood with nowhere to run. Can anybody save us?
Hello, Josie. Hi, hi. I do have a dog. He does bark sometimes, so we're gonna have to try to manage that, won't we, Bomb? Hey, my love. Hey, everybody. I am all the mess. I certainly am. My name is Melanie Brule, but you know that already because it's Instagram and you're here. Thank you so much for joining in. It's Mental Illness Awareness Week from October 4th to 10th. And I decided that I wanted to do a series of conversations with people about mental health. People who work in mental health, people who are interested in mental health. There's a whole week lined up, and it'll be every night at 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, which is the time it is now. Tonight, I'm really excited. I have Sarah Reynolds with me, who is a psychiatric nurse, who has some really interesting thoughts about where money should go. We're going to talk about that and a lot more things. But before we get started, I do want to say that viewer discretion is advised. I don't want any of this conversation to be censored at all. So I'm leaving it really open. It might not be suitable for young children. I have no idea what's going to happen. It's a live conversation. I also do want to say that if you are struggling with mental illness or need help with mental health, there's a number of places that you can go. If it's an emergency, you can contact your doctor. You can go to an emergency room at the hospital. There's also the CMHA, so cmha.ca has a whole lot of information. Also CAMH has a lot of information online. So if you do need help, those are the places you should go. This is a conversation about mental health, about mental illness, about a number of topics surrounding that. And I do really want you guys to be involved and ask questions and make comments here. And that's the whole point of getting the community talking, really. I'm going to ask you to like keep things pretty general in terms of your questions. If you have specific questions about a certain mental illness, there's probably better places to do that. So if you need any of that help, again, go to CMHA or CAMH website, and they can be more specific with you. So without further ado, I'm going to tap Sarah into the conversation here. And started. The idea is that it's going to last about 15 minutes, but heck, who knows? We might get amped up and end up talking for an hour. So, Sarah, how are you?
Hello, I'm well, thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay, we're gonna.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
My chin's adjusted here. Okay.
Thank you so much for being with me here today, Sarah, and
Sure.
being willing to talk about what you do and what you think and all of that stuff. So if we want to start maybe with like an introduction, your name, your pronouns, what do you do? Who are you?
Yeah, my name is Sarah Reynolds. I use the pronouns she and hers, and I'm a mental health nurse. I've been a mental health nurse for 35 years. I worked on an inpatient unit, first of all, then in the community for a mental health team. I worked in the emergency room as part of a psych team for 20 years. And a year ago, I went to sort of took a step back from the front lines. I'm in an outpatient department now, and I triage referrals for psychiatrists.
Right. So just for everyone to understand sort of lingo right now, what is outpatient versus inpatient?
So I get referrals mostly from family doctors for people who need to see a psychiatrist for a variety of reasons.
Right. Interesting.
So it's outpatient care. It's not an urgent service. It's for people who can wait the sort of 2-3 months they will need to see somebody.
Right. So somebody would go and get a referral from their doctor. They would
Yeah.
go and see their doctor first, and then they would come and see you, kind of thing.
Yes. So I would triage them by phone and set up appointments, which are now just about all online, except for people who can't do online for a variety of reasons as well.
Right.
But yeah, that's about it.
Right. And 35 years, that's a long time working in this industry, Sarah.
I know, honestly.
How are you?
I just started a 4-day-a-week schedule. So today's my first Monday off. So from now on, I will be a Tuesday to Friday worker. So,
well, congratulations. And we've put you to work on a Monday here.
Yes, not to worry.
So tell me a little bit, Sarah, about why you got into mental health work to begin with.
I just I thought then it was a lot more interesting than any other area of nursing. You have a lot of freedom as a nurse to do your own kind of thing as a psychiatric nurse, especially in the community and as part of a team. I did work for a while as part of an MCIT team, so the mobile crisis intervention team, the nurse cop pairing. But I've really enjoyed it. Every day is different, and people are endlessly fascinating, and it's been a really good and rewarding career to have.
Right. You seem like a very warm person. I think if I was, in a moment of crisis, you'd definitely be. From the last couple of conversations we've had, I feel like you're someone people can really count on. So,
thank you. I hope so.
So thanks for your work. We do have a question that just came up that says, do you find therapy over Zoom as effective as in person?
It really depends. Some people really like it because they don't have to travel, they don't have to leave home. Other people say it's just not the same. They can't really relate. They don't feel like they're talking to a real person.
Right.
Young people tend to do better. I think they are more comfortable with the technology. People my age and my neighborhood, they have difficulty understanding even quite simple technology. It's been a big learning curve for me too. And they would rather sit in a room with one person, and sometimes it's a matter of privacy. And talking to people through COVID, I talked to someone who said they had one computer and a lot of the grandkids were using it for school. They
Right.
didn't really have the bandwidth to have a long conversation over the internet, and he didn't have any privacy. So for all those reasons, he's waiting to be seen in person.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. And I would imagine that someone who is struggling with the technology to begin with, that just adds on to your stress of
Yeah,
doing that.
yeah. It just
Yeah.
all looks weird, I think.
Yeah. I've been doing therapy for, I think, maybe 5 years now, since 2015. And I had one in-person session,
Hmm.
which was in Montreal while I was cutting a record there. And then she said, "Okay, like I'll see you in 6 weeks." And I was like, "Well, no, no, no. I live in Toronto. I won't be around, you know." And she said, "No, we can do it by Skype." And it blew my mind that that was even possible.
Hmm.
And I loved it because when I was on the road, I could have my time still, and I would do it in
Yeah,
whatever hotel or bedroom I was in, and I put my
yeah,
gym jams on, and I lay in bed and I prop myself up with all my pillows. And what I love about doing therapy via Skype or video chat is that when it's done, I can put the phone down and I can lay down and just
yeah,
like be in my own space with my comforts and have my cup of tea and take a nap or whatever, rather than kind of getting in the car right away
yeah.
and having
And
to deal with
yeah, pull yourself
reality.
together, and yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
People.
right.
Yeah. I wonder if the fact that you had a relationship with her at first, I mean, you met her even only once, but you had that initial face-to-face connection with her.
That
Just,
probably opened a door for me, I think. And then I became like comfortable with the idea of that. So I've got a new therapist since, and I've never met him.
okay.
We've never been in the same room together, but he's awesome, and I really connect with him. And yeah, I think I was his first online client too,
Mm,
because I was a bit of a road dog. I was always on the road. So I was like, "Do you even do this? Is this okay?" And so we were doing it just through FaceTime. And now that COVID has hit, now he's got the Zoom system and all that stuff,
yeah,
and it's kind of normal. So I'm glad for people that, in a sense, having that video option is probably opening a door for more people to access
yeah,
mental health care, if you will, as opposed to like that feeling of having to like one even get to where you're going, let alone making an appointment and all of that stuff. So
yeah.
another quick question here. I've got a question that says, does a person ever get rid of mental illness? That's an interesting question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some, yes. Some people could have a period of depression, an episode of depression that remits either with medication and or therapy, and they can never have another one. I think when people are anxious, you're always going to be an anxious person, and it's more a matter of learning tools to deal with it. People who've had a lot of trauma are always going to be affected and have to, find good therapy, which can be very difficult, and find ways to deal. But I think people can have good lives and happy lives and meaningful lives as long as they get support and help in whatever way is most meaningful. And it's got to be accessible too. We talked about that before. It can be very hard to find ongoing, consistent care.
Yeah, right. Um, an interesting point that I wanted to talk with you about is like that you've been somewhat vocal about the movement of funds from one place to another, to say it gently. But let's talk about that for a minute and what you think we can do in terms of putting more money into mental health care. How does that work? Where do we start? What does it look like?
Yeah.
If you were the boss of all of this, Sarah, how would it go?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the MCIT, so the Mobile Crisis Intervention teams, the COP nurse team, I think the model is a good one, but it just needs some tweaking. I think it would be nice if people could call MCIT directly, and right now they can't. They have to call the police department. The police department decides when to send the teams. I think it would be nice if the nurse could call ahead and do some triage. I think it would probably be most beneficial if the nurse could go in by herself or himself if they decide that that would be the best thing. I would love to see the police take more of a back seat and be there for backup and for any safety issues. But right now, they really are front and center. The most prominent role, having done it with the MCIT, is the police. And it's from a perspective of keeping, so the nurse is considered a civilian and the police are, armed and trained. So you never get called to an active shooter situation or anything that there's any kind of danger. You
Right.
never get an MCI. So the Sammy Yateen case, which I think would have been perfect for an MCIT team, wouldn't have been called because it was the case of a weapon. So I think it could be expanded a great deal. I think more money. They need to be, I think, 24 hours or at least 18 hours. Right now it's quite limited. I think they need to be in every hospital in every single community. So I think an expanded, revamped MCIT team would be a really good idea. In terms of defunding the police, defunding really means just reallocating funds. I'm not for getting rid of police entirely. So I think maybe the languaging around that is a bit confusing. I think the police would be very happy not to be called for all these mental health checks. I mean, it's not their area of expertise either. They've done a lot better over the years, and I think just out of necessity, they've had to develop some expertise, but I think they'd be quite happy to leave mental health mostly to nurses and social workers and people with, it's not just nurses either. I think social workers, community workers, people who've got experience with addictions, street outreach workers. There are all these wonderful people, community workers, who they're also underpaid and overworked, and they tend to have very heavy caseloads. These people would be great to have as part of an expanded MCIT team. So really putting mental health first and the expertise of the mental health worker first, police at the back.
Yeah,
I think would be.
I totally agree with you. I mean, someone who's like, I'm always thinking about mental health and that sort of thing. It's funny because when all this, when the defund the police campaign, if you will, started, I was like, defund the police, like, whoa, that seems so extreme. And then you read about what they're actually talking about, and we're just talking about reallocating funds and taking some of that money essentially for prevention, as well as using people who are trained, specifically in this. I do feel like the police have a lot on their plate in terms of what they have to know and do and be experts at. And there are better trained people for that job, So yeah, I'm glad we talked about this, just to talk about the wording and that sort of thing, because I think it's a shock to people when they hear something like defund, it's like, take it away. Just talking about reallocating where it could be more useful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Let's talk maybe about what you think some misconceptions about mental illness, being as though you worked on the front line for so long, and you're still so involved. What can we do better as a community to support people who are going through that? And what do you think the misconceptions are that we could clear up for people today?
I think there's still a stigma attached to mental health. I think there's the thought that if you just tried a bit harder, you could be well, or you could not use drugs, or you could not be psychotic or depressed. I mean, I still think there are some, I think culturally specific care is important, and it's not something we tend to have. Some cultures really are not comfortable with any discussion of mental health. Have no concept really of mental illness, and people can end up feeling very isolated, very misunderstood. So I think constantly working to reduce the stigma and accept that we're also very crisis focused. So I think whenever we talk about money, like young people, there is a bit of a crisis in having accessible care for young people, but a lot of it is crisis care. So you can get an assessment and maybe 6 sessions and nothing else. And I think there are barriers. Mostly it's a money barrier because
Mhm.
I think most real therapy happens in the community. Can certainly be told. Certainly, it can be psychiatrists, but it's often social workers and psychologists, and most of these people are not covered by OHIP, so it can be $150, $250 an hour for a session with with a psychologist or a private therapist. So I think more people need to be able to bill OHIP, so that needs to be expanded too. The crisis bit is pretty good right now, but it's the follow up, I think, that needs to
Yeah,
happen.
right. So, just so that people know, what are the steps if you're in a crisis mode?
Yeah.
Where do you start?
So it can start, there's a bunch of good people to call. I mean, sometimes people just will call the hospital and they'll get sent to me just because they don't know where to start. So they'll call a hospital, ask for the mental health department. There are crisis lines. The Gerstein Center in the city of Toronto is a great resource. And they have mobile teams for people in the city of Toronto. They've got a place to stay for people in the city of Toronto, but they have a crisis line where they can talk to people and they can tell you in your community, because it's all very piecemeal. They can tell you in your community for support. So after the crisis line, there's always the emergency room. I always tell people it's not too busy, but if you go, say, 9 o'clock in the morning and be very specific about what your needs are, I would really like to talk to someone. Do you have a crisis team? Do you have a crisis nurse? Do you have somebody I could speak to? I'm really having difficulty. Um, and be as clear as possible that you're seeking care. If it's less of a crisis, people can speak to their family doctors about getting a referral to either somebody in the community, or every hospital will have an outpatient department of psychiatry. Um, where I work, it's sort of 2 to 4 months. We've had a huge increase in referrals over the summer, and I think a lot of it's due to
Yeah.
people feeling really isolated from COVID. And I think Humber River Hospital, as of last year, they closed their wait list at 18 months. So, I mean, I shouldn't mention specifics. I hope it's improved since then, but people are constantly working to when I started a year ago, our wait list was 8 or 9 months. And then we got it right down with an initiative from our doctors to just see more and more and more people.
Right.
Cut down the list. So that's certainly something. Emergency room is always, I used to tell people to call the police all the time, but I don't so much now, because I think um, if you're large and you're not white, and you're male and psychotic, you could, don't call the police. 'Cause, I mean, if it's a matter of safety, if you're feeling at risk of being harmed by someone, you can still call the police. But I think an ambulance might be a better bet. Sometimes you call the ambulance and the ambulance calls the police. But unless you're in absolute real crisis, fearing for your life or fearing for the life of the other person, I would try and go um, to a hospital. And people
Right.
are afraid
And I
because they're
mean,
trying to support people in crisis, just to interrupt you. And they're afraid to
yeah,
ask if someone is suicidal. And I think you can very clearly ask the question, are you feeling suicidal? Are you telling me you're feeling unsafe right now? What can we do together to plan for your safety until we can get you some kind of help? And be very specific and, take it step by step.
right. And like, I mean, case in point right there where, yeah, I appreciate, I appreciate you mentioning that, because it's, yeah, it's good to know that there, I mean, you can go to the emergency room. That's probably your best bet,
Yep.
right? If you're feeling
Yeah.
like something's happening immediately.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's always open.
one more question for you, Sarah, before we wrap it up.
Mhm.
But what do you do to keep your own mind healthy?
Meditate and do yoga. And I think it's been very helpful, just to kind of I mean, I'm not a Buddhist, but the Buddhist idea that we're all kind of in this together, we're all one. And a sort of CBT idea, this too shall pass. Nothing lasts, nothing's permanent. The good doesn't last, the bad doesn't last.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm sort of generally an optimistic person anyway. So even with all this stuff going on, I tend to feel that, you know, people are good and mean well for each other. And um, I'm hopeful for the future for all of us.
Yeah, me too. I feel like this is a really weird time right now, and
Oh, definitely.
extremely difficult for a lot of people. And I mean, I've been having a lot of anxiety lately as well, and I realized that waking up and checking my phone first thing is not good for me.
Yeah.
So I downloaded a meditation app, and I've been like, I reset my whole notifications section in there.
Yes, good.
So that I'm not getting notified about every single thing every minute. I have to look to get notified now, because that was
Yeah.
a big source of my anxiety. It was like,
Yeah.
you need me right now. And I'm like, I just can't,
Yeah.
you know? So waking up in the morning and doing a little meditation, honestly, sometimes I just turn around and I fall back asleep. But I figure that there's something happening to my subconscious anyway while
Yeah.
that's happening.
You need
So
the rest if you're falling back to sleep. Yeah.
there you go.
There's a ton of great meditation apps. I like Insight Timer.
Oh,
And there's tons of free content, and, you know, 5-minute meditations and much longer, and courses you can take. And a lot of it's very, my daily meditation.
oh, it was
You
cutting
stop
up there a
moving,
little bit.
Melanie.
That's all right.
Oh, you froze.
Yeah, you were freezing too. I don't know. Maybe it's my connection. Maybe it's yours. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Sarah, thank you so much for talking to us about all of this stuff. I,
My
I,
pleasure.
I appreciate you. I appreciate so much. There was another question that I was going to ask you, and do you think that, I mean, we're saying that like it sometimes takes a long time. Your best bet is to go to the emergency room, but after you have your first few sessions, you might have to wait again to have, you know, more access, if you will. Are we missing mental health workers in Ontario, in Toronto? Do we need more mental health workers, or do we need to
We,
move the money around in a different way?
I think we need to move the money around. I think we need to be able to access, say, CBT given by psychologists.
Right, which is
If
cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah, so
Cognitive
I mean,
behavioral therapy?
cognitive behavior therapy. Yeah, so it's great for, I mean, with or without medication, it's evidence-based, best thing for panic and anxiety, which a lot of people suffer from.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have money, you can start tomorrow. So addiction services, if you have
Right.
money, you can head off tomorrow. The wait is because people can't afford it, and the public things are very oversubscribed. So
Right.
that's it. It's a matter of access. It's unfortunate. It looks like a two-tier system, because the private services are expensive and not covered by OHIP. Insurance covers some, but you need a good job with good insurance too. There's a lot of
Right.
people who can't afford the services that are available. That's a big
Right.
problem.
Which adds to the whole thing. I mean, if you're financially stressed out, your mental health is
Yeah.
probably not where it should be, because, and then, you know, it's that rolling over of all this stuff all together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to explain just briefly what's involved with cognitive behavioral therapy? Because I find that really interesting.
Yeah, so cognitive behavior therapy, it's a treatment. You can actually find online stuff. The basic idea is you draw a triangle with thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So you can't do much about your thoughts. You can't do much about the way you feel, but what you can change is your behavior. So all thoughts are in the mind. They're all just considered, you know, they might be true, they might not be true. You don't believe it just because you think it. So a classic example is usually if you see your neighbor across the street and you say hello and your neighbor doesn't answer, if you're feeling fine, you just say, oh, well, I guess he didn't see me. If you're feeling low, you might think, of course he wouldn't speak to me. Why would he speak to me? I'm such a loser. Nobody wants to speak to you. So you have the way you are feeling makes you very negative, and so you evaluate this in a very negative way. And
Yes.
CBT says, let's look at this. Let's look at evidence for and against. And there's a great book that we use a lot at work. Of course, I'm blanking on the name. Mind Over Mood, Podesky and Greenberger. It's available at Indigo and all these places at the library. It's great to have a look at because it's sort of a manualized therapy. Anyone can do it. People do it on their own, and there are online. I'm again blanking on the names. But if you just Google online CBT, but the idea is you can
Okay.
gain skills to challenge some of these thoughts and beliefs, and in so doing, you can improve your outlook. So a lot of people
Amazing.
hate CBT. I love CBT.
Yeah, I've
People think
only
it's
just
something
heard of it recently, but I find it really fascinating. And essentially, you're like reprogramming your brain, right?
Yeah, you're being open to the fact that maybe you're looking at things through, a big dark set of glasses if you're depressed or anxious. And it might not be true what you're thinking, and it can lead to, I think, a lot of freedom. So,
Yeah. Awesome. Sarah, thank you so much for being with us and sharing all of this stuff. It's
you're very welcome.
certainly a topic that we could spend hours and hours talking about, but I think there's like a lot of good little nuggets in there that people can hold on to and do some research and check out some stuff. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing
You're
all of
welcome.
your 35 plus years of knowledge with us.
You're welcome.
And yeah, let's keep in touch. And thanks a lot to Eric Leach for
Yeah.
the connection.
Eric,
Yeah.
you're welcome, Eric. Okay,
All right.
thanks.
Well, let's keep in touch, Sarah, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Okay,
Ciao.
you're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye. So I'm just going to let Sarah out of the chat here. And I thought a good way to end these mental health talks with people, because, stuff might be coming up a little bit. So let's just take a little breather. Let's just take a few breaths together. So if you're into it, you can close your eyes. Let all the crap out. One more. Thank you for tuning in. Please join me again tomorrow, because we're going to do this tomorrow. Tomorrow I have someone who works for the Canadian Mental Health Association. Her name is Angèle Delacio. She's in my hometown in Cornwall. She's going to talk to us about why Mental Illness Awareness Week happens to begin with, and the services that are offered at the CMHA, which is a national organization. So it doesn't matter what city you are in Canada. If you are somewhere else in the world, if you're tuning in from Europe or Australia or Africa or the USA, I'm sorry I can't be more specific about things that are available in your areas. However, if you need help with a Google search, let me know. I can help you out. But Google is a really beautiful tool and can help keep us all connected. And I hope some of the lingo today helped you out. I hope you got something out of it. I sure did. I learned a lot. So I'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here, and much love. I'm a mess. You're a mess. 2020 is a mess. Let's deal with it. Thanks for tuning in. See you tomorrow.